Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Greatest Profession podcast. Before we get started, I did want to just quickly give a disclaimer that there is conversation and content surrounding suicide in this episode, particularly our relationship with the individuals who have committed suicide and kind of our experiences through that. So I will put some time codes just so you know roughly, where that conversation is within this episode. If you want to, I'll just go ahead and put that in the show notes below. Other than that, Laura and I mean, we're really good friends. We met in vet school, and we weren't friends right away, but then we got involved in this project. It was like a video project, which we totally misunderstood the assignment. But she was like a hooded drug dealer dealing meloxicam to the local farmers, and it was pass fail. So we passed. But anyway, so, we, this conversation then takes place because her and her husband were visiting, and she and I were chatting in my office. So it actually just, and you can tell this, we're quiet at the beginning, trying not to wake up the house. But that kind of ramps up in time, because, we kind of forget. We probably woke up the house. But anyway, so it starts off quiet, and maybe about after like 20 minutes of nothingness, we just kind of all of a sudden jump into other such lighthearted topics like sexual harassment and misogyny, and so it kind of goes on like that. But I swear it's not a total drag. It's actually one of my it was one of my favorite episodes recording. I mean, Laura and I, anytime that you have a chance to sit down and really talk to a good friend, it's a great time. But I think that there's kind of a lot here regarding our experiences within this industry, and I think that that's something that I'm very much looking forward to sharing with you guys. I actually broke this episode down into two separate episodes. So episode 1 is this one, and it's kind of our, I would say kind of the non-clinical, non-practice stuff about our lives within this industry, our experiences surrounding that. The next episode, which I will probably release on Thursday, that's kind of more about, Laura and her husband started a practice in Morehead City, North Carolina, maybe a little bit sooner than they would like to. But we talk a lot about what that was like, starting a clinic and the priorities that they have, and focus on culture and, things like that, which I find really valuable too. And so, we actually kind of I just broke these episodes down into two separate things. So please enjoy this. And again, if you, I'll write the time codes surrounding that specific suicide-related content, just in case you are interested in, maybe maneuvering past that. But I am really happy with these, and I'm really excited to share this with you. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Laura Bailey. It is one thing, like, especially as a guy who goes into these hospitals, it's maybe different now. But I felt like when I was younger and single, it's a weird line to walk. And I'm somebody who's friendly and oblivious.
Well, and oblivious is that. But we're in a culture now where everybody's sensitive, and it's very easy for men to get in trouble for a lot of times pretty innocent things, which isn't fair. It's not fair. But also, this was born from an era of women being treated like cattle.
Right.
So I understand how we got here, but now that I have guy friends, most of which are very respectful to women, and but most of which are very respectful towards women, and I watch them get in trouble for what was meant to be an innocent act. And then I think the worst part of it is these girls will like go and get these guys in trouble, and then the guys will like put up a really firm boundary and like really try to avoid it, and then these women will like be offended. Like, I know one of our colleagues was working, and a tech, like he was Snapchat friends with a bunch of his techs, which I know some people would say is not okay. I actually think that this idea that you can't like be friends with your techs, as long as you can keep it respectful in the workplace and obviously have lines, is crap.
Right.
But so he was like Snapchat friends with a bunch of them, and he was out on the beach with his friends one day and like sent like a see one, send one, or a some kind of thing to like his whole list. You know how you'll send those. And she like told everybody he was sending her like shirtless pics and all this stuff. And once he had caught wind of it, he was like, you know, that is not what was happening. But he deleted her from Snapchat. Then she freaking approached him and was like, why did you delete me from Snapchat? Or what, are we not friends anymore? And I'm like, but that's the kind of stuff, like, how do you navigate that?
I don't know.
And what it does is it discredits women who are having actual encounters that need to be addressed. So it's not a good thing for it to be like that. And I've seen them do it as retaliation and stuff. Now, I have guy friends who deserve it sometimes, right? Like, so I think it's frustrating that that kind of interaction should be, I don't know, used. You know, you should tattle or tell, or I don't want to say tattle because that sounds like it, but you should report these people when things are actually happening.
Right.
But when women do it and it's not actually happening, it really sucks for these guys. And it makes them uncomfortable in their workplace.
Yeah.
You know, it makes them feel unable to have interactions. And if you're constantly guarded, you talk about, you know, mental health issues, like that causes issues too. So unpopular opinion. I think it's unfair.
I think it's an opinion that I feel like I can't express.
No, you absolutely can't. I can only say it because I have tits. Like, that's just the facts.
Right. But I have thoughts. Like, one is that I think that I do agree that there is an increased sensitivity. I don't necessarily think that it is a bad thing. I think it is a pendulum that has swung perhaps too far in the other direction.
As everything seems to do these days.
Right. And so then what's nice about that is it's like having a too bright of a light that shines over the entire landscape, and you say like, well, actually there were these smaller things that we would not have caught otherwise, so that maybe we're able to attend to them a little bit better. Yeah. Meanwhile, you know, it's like high sensitivity, poor specificity, right?
Absolutely. That's a perfect way to put it.
And I think that is a good thing for us to then be able to acknowledge that this type of thing exists, but it can't be an endpoint. We have to be able to come back to somewhere in the middle.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. I mean, this needed to happen. It's not okay the way things have been managed. I mean, even in the conversation we were just having about how I've been uncomfortable with, and no, it's not fair. I shouldn't have to ever be uncomfortable around a dude just because I'm there. Like, that's not acceptable. Yeah. And that kind of stuff needs to stop. And so I hope what happens is like you're saying, this pendulum, we end up in the middle or more in the middle. And, you know, men have learned to be more respectful, and women are, you know, protecting themselves and discussing the hard things when they come up, but are not so sensitive that interactions are impossible, you know?
Yeah.
Which I hope, I don't know, I'm not trying to be not PC, but like...
You know, I will say that from my perspective, and this is... So my life has been one where I feel like I'm constantly trying to avoid making people feel uncomfortable, right? Like, you know, you're walking down an alley or on a sidewalk, I'm going to like fly to the other side, like no eye contact. Like, I'm just like,
you're like Keanu Reeves with his arm out.
Right, exactly. Like, I don't want it. I want it to be very clear that I'm not going to be a problem. But that requires, I feel like, you know, maybe it's just because of my personality, but it makes it so that, to your point, there is like this sort of mental health toll that goes with it. Now, on the other side of that, like, sure, it's way worse to constantly feel like every, you know, because every fella is a potential, you know, risk, effectively, because there might be 99 people who walk down the street who are like totally fine, but it's like that one person who isn't.
And it's not a small deal if that happens,
right.
You know, like that's a life-changing thing. So to be on guard,
right.
It's just, I mean, I guess that's human nature, right? It's not like this is a new thing. It's just now we're talking about it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that thing of like there's always a danger somewhere is and I'm not just saying this to, whatever to say, but I do think that that's actually legitimately worse on a mental health, right, from a mental health perspective, than like the thing of like, I don't want to bother anybody. I want to make sure that I'm not like, I'm as inoffensive as possible. Right.
Absolutely. And it is a terrible feeling as a woman to feel like you're being, one, to feel unsafe, or to feel like somebody's like being inappropriate with you, especially when you're trying to do your job. I mean, that is an awful feeling. And so I do think like ultimately I would rather us be sensitive to it than bull crap we were dealing with before.
Right.
I can't imagine if I was a career woman in the 70s. I would have been like a tornado ripping through there. It would not have gone well for anyone, including me, probably.
Yeah.
But I do hope, I do feel for my respectful male friends who are trying really hard to navigate through this field and not be the jerk, standoffish doctor, but also not create inappropriate moments, especially because we have to be so physical in this job. And we touch each other in weird ways all the time. There's no way around it.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny when I do it, but like, I know that the two guys at my practice like have to work really hard. Like, I don't care, right? I don't think about it. If I want to listen to the other side of the heart, here I come. Like, get the girls out of the way.
Right.
But like, I watch my husband and he is so careful.
Yeah, you have to announce it. You have to be like, I'm going to listen to the other side now, or I'm
like,
coming
get your
over.
boobs out of the way, here I come. But like, he can't say that. That's not good.
Slap him.
Yeah, right. I'm like, sorry about that, fondle, but I'm not going to change how I do things, right? But like, the guys can't do that and shouldn't do that.
Right.
But is that fair? Probably not. Well, I mean, maybe it's fair, but
yeah,
it's probably fair.
I think it's fair.
But it is like, that is more challenging, I think, to be a guy in this like women's field.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more like sort of landmines to maybe navigate through. But what's interesting is and I guess I wanted to ask you about, because you are in your second practice, like as in you purchased this practice, but you worked in one before.
Yes, as a doctor, this is the second practice that I've worked in.
Yeah, and then before that, like before vet school, you just worked at the same place?
So before vet school, I spent like 9 years. I started when I was 17, working in a practice back home, a small practice back home as like all the staff, right? In these small town practices, I did kennels. I was like your classic story, kennels,
right.
But also tech, but also reception, right? As I should say, assistant. But I was there for a really, really long time. And then I did some externshipy stuff, but really that's it. It's those three practices are the ones that my like whole career have been based around.
Did you feel like during that process at all, like in any of those practices, that you were maybe like this subjugated woman, or
no?
Okay.
But I also like my personality doesn't lend itself to that.
Right.
Just to be honest, like I'm pretty aggressive and obnoxious, and the doctor that I worked for back home, that was not a thing. Like he was very respectful. I never felt weird. I mean, I was intimidated because I was a child. Yeah. Trying to learn to do this field I wanted to do forever. Right. But no, never. And then my first practice as a veterinarian, my boss loved me and I loved him. Like he was wonderful. And like in a very respectful, platonic kind of way, we had a great time. I'm still like, my life would have been very different if he had not passed away. Like, I don't think I would have, I don't know if I would have ever left.
Yeah.
Like I loved working for him. He was a hoot. He was a maniac, but he was playing bass in surgery while I'm trying to do exams and stuff like that. But I thought it was great.
I love those stories because like it's not like he was good.
No. Oh no, he was terrible. And I think the cool thing oh man, I have such fond memories. And he died, sadly, he killed himself, we're pretty sure, 6 months into my career. So that was like huge. But in the 6 months, like he's like forever impacted me. But I came in, he'd been at this practice for like 1 billion years. And one of the things that was great about him is he had like fantastic employee retention. So everybody else had also been there for like 1 billion years.
Right.
And they were done with his antics. They're like, like his shenanigans are no longer funny. This is enough. And I came in and I was like, hey, casually, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, are you guys not, does nobody, like, homeboy is in black jeans, a black t-shirt, flip-flops, like, practicing medicine.
Right.
I'm like, where am I? And then that day, still my favorite. He had a negative Explorer, but luckily he brought his base. I don't know if it made him feel better.
Right.
Like, not that it was wrong to cut this dog, but you know what happens.
Sure.
And so I am up front in exam rooms, and you can hear the, like, wall shaking and, like, this poor bass player.
Yeah.
And my clients said nothing. Like, we looked each other in the eye, and so I said nothing, like, straight face. I'm like, oh, we're going to act like this is normal? Yeah. I'm in. It was hilarious. I mean, it was so loud, and the client's just like, I don't know if they're used to it.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, yeah, whatever, random stuff happens in this building. But they just, like, wrote it out. So I was like, well, I'm going to write it out. And then I go out to him, and he's like, how do I sound? I was like, oh, man. Even as the day went on, you sounded better. I was like, I think you should use your spare time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Practice. This needs to keep happening.
Yeah.
And the clients loved it.
See, that's what we all need. We just need some encouragement in our crazy.
Oh,
because
yeah.
Actually, because that's what makes us endearing and unique and individual.
Oh, my gosh. He was...
Yeah.
Oh, I loved him. He was a good
Practice
doctor,
more
too.
bass. Turn the bass up more, please.
I learned a lot from him, but he was very, like, hack and slash. Like, I remember we went in, I was trying to do, like, my first lipoma removal, and he comes in, and I'm, like, carefully dissecting it out, and he put on a pair of gloves, grabbed the lipoma, and just, like, ripped it off the dog. I was like, oh, okay, we're fine. Thank God. And then I was doing my first tail amputation. I was like, hey, like, wanted his opinion, and he could never say it without showing you. So he takes it, and he just, like, cuts the skin too short, right? So, like, I ended up having to take an extra vertebrae.
Right.
And then he's, like, just sort of hands it. He's, like, talking to me and, like, holding the tail. And it has, you know, the bleeder in the tail. And it is just spewing. And he just keeps talking with his hands, with the tail. And blood is going everywhere. And I was, like, horrified. And I was like, okay, thank you for your help. Can I just... And I, like, scurried him along and, like, took an extra vertebrae. It was fine.
But now the texts are like, same shit. Never.
Yeah. They're, like, unfazed. Like, nonplussed by this man. I was like, y'all... This is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, he invited us to a wine tasting. And so I roll into this wine tasting. He gets there late. Okay. He rolls up in his, like, Harley Davidson, but with, like, a work t-shirt on that has, like, cartoons on it.
Wow.
Oh, it's rough. And he, like, strolls in. And this poor gentleman is trying to discuss politely with us, you know, oh, this wine is from South Africa. And the grapes were smashed by elephant feet. And, like, and he, like... walks in, like, grabs his first glass, and then the guy, like, comes up, he's like, would you like your other one? And, like, doesn't miss a beat, keeps talking, reaches his hand out, takes the glass from the guy, and just, like does, and this poor man's just trying to do his job. Oh my gosh, we had so much fun. But, you know, to go back, I was actually thinking about your question, have I ever felt, like, kind of uncomfortable as a woman?
Yeah.
It just struck me. During my interviews, I actually had some weird experiences.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it.
Like your interviews?
For the job in North Carolina. I did 3 interviews. One of them was with a practice that was owned by, like, a couple who had just, like, recently had some embezzlement or something. And so that interview was awful. Okay. Like, they were just like, we're going to look at everything. And you could just tell they had, like, had a terrible experience and were afraid of everything. Yeah. I was like, okay.
Right.
The next one was this dude who owned 2 practices. And so I go in for the interview, and he's, like, super condescending. And he goes, you know, he tells me, like, for the first 6 months, he will review every one of my medical records and make critiques. And then he's like, let me take you to show you the second practice. And so I get in the car with a stranger because I didn't learn anything as a child. And for some reason, this is twice. I did this twice. Okay. So, so I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm, like, sitting with him, and he, instead of driving me to the practice, drives me by his house, which I was like, really, at this point, I'm like, I'm, like, very uncomfortable. I'm, like, alone in the car. You know, you got my hand on my cell phone. I'm like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
And this, maybe I shouldn't say I felt like I was harassed, but I just remember feeling crappy. Like, he goes, this is my house. And we, like, pull up in front. I was like, oh, it's really nice. And he goes, it's big, isn't it? And then just, like, looks at me. And I was like, sure is, buddy. Like, and like, I know it was small, but like it stuck with me. It was such a weird moment.
Yeah.
And obviously I didn't take the job, and the dude has like a terrible record. And then, but then apparently that's a thing I learned, because then I get to the job I actually accepted, because I guess I'm insane. And he also is like, here, come on, I'll take you to lunch. I was like, okay, like that seems normal. We were going to have like some contract negotiation stuff. He takes me immediately to his house that he then takes me inside of. He's like, come in here. This is my boss. Okay. And I was like, oh no. And then it was like, fine. He's just like, here's my house. I play guitar. And then he like took me to like his dock. And he's like, this is a dock. And I was like, oh. And then he like drove me to this secret piece of property. And I'm like, I'm definitely going to be murdered here, right? Like, so I'm prepared at this point. Sure. And he like gets out. He's like, I haven't told anybody about this, but sometimes I just sit here. And I was like, and then we went to lunch and I didn't get murdered. So I mean, like, that was good. But isn't that weird? Yeah. So those were the weird experiences that I have had. And I still took that job. So I don't know.
But obviously the second experience wasn't creepy.
Yeah, if you had met him with his adult braces and like rock and roll, he came out looked like Johnny Cash, but not edgy, like a soft Johnny Cash. I don't know. I just really liked him. Yeah. And he like yelled at a staff member, which he never did apparently, in front of me. And I still took the job. I don't know what I was thinking. He just gave me good vibes, and it was the right choice. Like it was the best first job ever. He was awesome. I just wish he had been around longer.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I don't know. I just had good vibes. Like for one of them, I was like, you're quirky. And the other, I was like, oh, you're creepy.
Right.
Like, and it's amazing the difference that makes.
Right. Yeah, because then the question is like, what's the intent? I think that's always, I talked to Lindsay about this when I'm like, okay, so I have this thing. I stayed a lot of hotels, right? Because I'm on the road, and one of the things that happens is that I'm always on the top floor, because I've like stayed at so many hotels. I have like the status or whatever, and so the people who are those people who also stay on that floor are often businesswomen, traveling businesswomen, and I happen to be like going to work at the same time that they're, or no, I'm coming back from the gym at the same time that they're coming back from work, and it's like, I don't know how to navigate that time where I'm like in the elevator with this other person. Like, do I just stand here creepily? Do I say something? It's like, I don't know what to do in that time, and be like, hey, by the way, because also we're going to get off at the same floor, and then I have to be like,
oh, you got to follow her to her room.
Right. Exactly. And so it's like, I have to bolt out of the elevator and be like, oh, I'm behind.
I'm not behind you.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, so I wrestle with this all the time, and I was talking to Lindsay about it, and she's like, well, it depends on like what the intent of what you're doing is, right? So it's like, if I say like, hey, how's it going? Like, you know, what a great day, or some small talk thing, and then like go off and do your thing. It's like, you can say hi, you can ask questions about somebody, but it's like, what's the intent of doing that thing?
Yeah.
And it seemed, my question is like, with that, you know, that first guy, it's like, what was the intent of driving you by his place and being like, big, huh? Yeah. What is that?
I don't know. I don't know if it was meant to show me that, hey, you can make some money as a veterinarian here.
Right.
Which
maybe.
Maybe, but it really felt more like putting me in my place.
Right.
I think that's why I was uncomfortable. Whereas the second one, it just felt endearing. The whole thing was endearing to me instead.
It almost sounds like he was trying to like invite you into his life.
Yes, that's exactly what it felt like, even though the actions were pretty similar.
Right.
And like working for him, and I know he adored me. Like, I was in the letter, like he like was very loving and nice, but never weird. Like, and he would go out with my friends, and we would go have dinner, have a drink, or go to like music events. He loved to invite us to watch him do karaoke, which was my favorite activity. Yeah. But it was, I never, not one single time in those 6 months, felt anything but like I will say friendly uncle. It was definitely not fatherly, but like he was amazing. So I don't know. I just have the most fond memories of him. And it's funny for me still. I still think it's hilarious to think about that whole experience. Yeah. The ending sucked, but everything else was pretty fantastic.
That's gotta be, I mean, if you don't mind me asking about it, but like, I know that at some point you were talking about how some like recent grad had a very similar experience, and you were like, yeah, let me talk to you about it.
Yes.
What, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how to even like begin the questions, but it's like, what was that what was that like? Because I suppose in my mind, it's like you came to this place, your thought was, well, I'm going to be here for a while. I'm going to like take over this clinic. This is like my mentor now. Like this is the way that life is going to go. And then very immediately it wasn't that.
Yeah. There were a lot of mixed feelings. You know, he lived the street, like one street over from the clinic. So I was at work the day it happened and he hadn't showed up, and we were like calling, and then we saw the ambulances and the police cars go, and like staff members, you could walk to his house. They like ran to his house and saw them bring the body out. And like, then we all got copies of the note. And that was like, I mean, it was awful. Yeah. And I remember at first like feeling kind of shocked. And then even though I have all these fond memories, and I realize, you know, I didn't know him well enough to recognize the signs, and maybe I wouldn't have even if I did know him. I understand that that's part of it, but I also was pretty pissed off. Like, I was like, you freaking agreed for me to come and do this, and that you were going to be here, and that I was going to have a future in this practice, and I hung my career on this, and then you freaking rolled out 6 months in and didn't leave the clinic with a plan. We aren't paid for like a couple months or a month or two in the beginning because the bank owned the practice and the other associate was like trying to buy, and that's not a fast process. And like this whole staff, bless their souls, stayed, at least initially, stayed not getting paid. Like people did not have money. And I was so mad because like the doctor that took over the practice, you know, I think she's a really good doctor. She's really nice, but she did not sign up to be my mentor. And that's like not her vibe. Right. Like she's not a mentor kind of person. She was, and she did she was really good to me. And I still really appreciate her. And, you know, we don't always leave on the best terms, but like, I still really am grateful for her, but that's not what she signed up for. That's what he signed up for. Right. And so then she, you know, we dropped from a 4-doctor practice to a 2-doctor practice because the doctor left right before this happened. And so in my first 6 months, all of a sudden, boom, I had like half of the workload. And the doctor that took over like surgery wasn't really her forte. And so like a lot of my surgical experience was very baptism by fire without a lot of backup. And it just all of a sudden I went from, you know, carefully picking what I thought was a good culture and a mentor who was going to be there and could guide me, or at least I'd have his backup, to like all these horror stories, you know, and I'd like planned so carefully for this, and then bam, it's just everything changed. And it was really challenging. Yeah. And I think like there was a lot of chaos, and I ended up staying another 1.5 years.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that long.
I was there for 2 full years. And then I guess I'll just share the final straw for me. I actually still really appreciate the owner of the practice. Like we don't talk anymore, but like I still think she's awesome. But the practice manager scolded me for going to a trivia night with the staff that everybody had been invited to, that I had even talked to my boss about. Right. And I remember, I think that was like the final straw. Yeah. Maybe it was just that loss of control, but for her to try to tell me what I could do in my free time, and also the fact that it was the office manager talking to me and not my boss. That was it. I immediately started looking for a new practice, and then we found this one that was for sale and jumped in 2 years out of vet school, which was maybe too much of a jump, but it was still awesome. And so,
which I still think that you were fine and ready for and all that, which we talked about at the time.
It worked out. It seems to be working out, but
the anger thing is interesting to me because so I had a cousin who committed suicide. His daughter found him, who was like 8, 10 maybe at the time. And like that was, I have a pretty big family. It was on my dad's side. There's, you know, 10 aunts and uncles. Well, there's 10 of them total. One of them is a woman. So, oh gosh. No. And then, you know, the kids from there. So there's like just a ton. There's a ton of us. And that was yes, I mean, of course, like there was this like sadness and this loss and tragedy thing, which truly, honestly, I felt was more related to the kids than anything else. But it was just like anger and, you know, railing against this idea of like, God, that was so selfish. And it's interesting to call somebody else selfish for something while feeling like, yeah, but this is because it's how it's affecting me.
Yeah. Oh, you're totally right. And I think now that I am farther removed and not living in that nightmare moment, I feel a lot of additional emotions,
sure.
because I mean, suicide's complicated. Everybody knows it. And it's a topic that I feel like I'm having to discuss a lot. Like clients are bringing it up now, and
really,
oh yeah. And I talk to my staff now. Every staff meeting, we take a moment to like check in, offer mental health support if they need it, because it's becoming, I mean, it's everywhere in our field. So now, having been screamed at in the parking lot and having lost patients, I fired a staff member and she died that night, right? Like, this field is brutal. And we fired her because of very reasonable things. She walked out on a shift because she got mad and a manager corrected her, and like, it was terrible. But like, it's everywhere in our field. And now that I felt some of the like mental health, I don't want to say attacks, it's the drain and the burnout and all those negative feelings and the crying on the bathroom floor over things that are really not my fault or my control, but I'm the one who has to like clean up or got screamed at for. I think I have a better understanding of how somebody could get there. I still like am mad for past Laura and like some of the things she had to feel, but like present Laura and future Laura, I think probably going to be more understanding of it, and aware of it. And now I'm really trying to take steps with my crew to check in and make sure that, they're not ignoring their mental health as we move forward with this. But yeah, anger I didn't have time to feel anything else. I was super sad.
Yeah.
And I was super pissed.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who are like affected by suicide feel that way. So yeah, I don't know. That was how I felt about it. But I think as I'm getting deeper into this field, I understand why that's happening more and more. And it shouldn't be ignored. Like, I had a client the other day ask me about it. And she's one of the clients, she's really nice, but she loves to complain about her bill and stuff. And they have medical.
I love it. It's like one of my favorite pastimes. Baseball, raffles, complaining about medical bills.
Yeah, and like has made my staff feel really bad and stuff. And she asked me about it, and she is nice to me, which is almost worse, like being crappy to my staff and then really nice to me. And I will call a client out for it. Yeah. But like, she asked me about veterinary suicide, and she's like, I hear the rates are kind of high. I was like, the rates are very high. And she's like, why is that? Is it because of all the euthanasias? I was like, no, it has nothing or very little to do with euthanasias. I said, and then I basically described her to her. And I was like, this is why it's happening. It's because clients come in here and they act like we're the bad guys for charging appropriately for our services, or they compare it to human medicine and talk about how it's not that expensive when they have insurance that's actually paying for it. Right. Or we have to watch animals suffer because of the choices their owners are making, but yet we're the bad guys in that moment. I was like, that's why it's happening. I don't think she understood what I was saying, but I just told her flat out. Like, if you ask me, I'll tell you. That's my motto. But yeah, I've had a few clients who like mentioned it, and I don't know, it's very challenging. And I understand when you combine that with the financial burden of these practices and the overhead of staff, it is really stressful, and none of us have business training. Like, it's the same spiel we all talk about. Right. It's a lot though. Like, it really becomes very draining and stressful. And I'm just glad I have a really good partner in this that balances me and can do the stuff that I'm not good at. Whereas I think a lot of these solo practitioners who buy, I mean, man, you're out, just floating with no support. So, I mean, I can see why it happened. I can see why he was drained. But also it still really sucked. So I don't know. But I think that the change has to start with us. We have to tell clients quit being jerks, but we have to stand up for ourselves. I'll fire a client. We're not going to have this abuse. I have discussions with clients that are being crappy. I'm like, hey, just so you know, we have like a no cussing out the staff policy. If you can't abide by that, you're out of here. Like, you get maybe one chance. A lot of times I get zero. I'm like, you're done. You're gone. And then we have to start charging for our services. You and I were talking about this yesterday. Like, it's hard, but everybody out there that is undercharging for their services is making it harder for the rest of us to charge appropriately. Because then they're like, well, I lived in Philadelphia and my vet only charged $4 for an exam. What are you doing? I'm like, then you should go back to Philadelphia. Like, I'm so sorry that you feel this way. Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
So, and then you have places like Walmart coming out with these freaking vet IQs that are charging pennies for things I cannot literally do what they do at cost for the price they're charging.
Right.
I'm like, screw you, Walmart. There's a shout out.
Yeah.
I'm glad you can buy in bulk, but the rest of us are just trying to get by.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. It's something that needs to be talked about, but I think that one of the things a lot of us struggle with, and I don't just mean veterinarians, I mean everywhere, is that we have a problem and we're waiting for somebody else to fix it.
Right.
And so we have to all start acting or this isn't going to get better. And also, I'm tired of being broke and not getting my student loans paid off. Like, come on. This is ridiculous. We go to plenty of school. We should get paid appropriately for what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I always say that there's like this catharsis that goes along with just talking about a problem. So it's like we can talk and talk and talk about, whatever, corporate buying structures and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that felt pretty good. So now we don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Misery loves company.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. And I find myself wrestling right now with that idea of like, well, okay, so do I actually... Like, what is my purpose here? How much do I feel like I really want to be involved with the solution? Because then if I don't want to be involved, then I don't get to complain, right? In my opinion. I mean, like, I can
it's
offer
like
some
not
ideas.
voting.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, but at the same time, I've discovered that my mental health is significantly better when I can do other things too. And so it's like, I don't want to sacrifice that stuff so that I can contribute to the field and let that be it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's about finding the purpose and figuring out where it's going to fit in my life and try to see, can I gain some sort of happiness or purpose from it?
Well, and I also think that veterinarians are notorious for making this career their life, right? Like, if you ask me, tell me about yourself, the first thing you're going to say is, well, I'm a veterinarian. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
well, maybe that's part of the problem,
yeah.
right? Like, part of the reason I am where I am, and you've heard me say this is my spiel, it's how I get people to move to where I am, right? Like, Clayton and I decided that we were going to choose our jobs based on financially, like, and the location. Like, what can provide us the most happiness outside of work? Because I can control that.
Right.
And so, and Ross, he's talked about that too. He's like, I love my life. So, like, balancing things at work is easier when things outside of work are good.
Right.
And so I think expecting this job to offer us fulfillment, at least to completely offer us fulfillment, the fulfillment that we need, that's like mistake number one that we're making.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I derive happiness from having enough money to buy the fishing poles that I want and to like live at the beach and have a home that I'm proud of. And that's part of why I wasn't one of those people that did the Dave Ramsey method where we paid off our loans like boom, boom, pow. We lived under a bridge and ate tuna for like years. It's like, screw that. We're going to pay the minimum on these freaking loans that are never going to go away anyway. Yeah. And we're going to pour money into setting ourselves up to be happy. And I regret nothing. Within my first 3 years, we bought our house, which I'm very proud of. We bought a practice. We bought a boat. It's an old boat. Don't get excited, guys. I'm still a veterinarian. It's a very old boat.
You have to row it.
Yeah, it has tried to sink, but only once. And also get boat insurance because then they have to tow you for free.
Nice.
And we love a good tow ride. But I chose to put my money towards those things, and we're starting to put a ton of money into our retirement because I want to be happy. And this job, it's not my job's job to make me happy.
Right.
It's my life's job to make me happy. And that's where I'm focused. Yeah. And so I think that has helped me get through being a completely crazy person who is absolutely obsessed with her patients and like gnaws on him like a dog does a bone after. You've heard me talk about patients here.
Right.
I'm like on the other side of the country worrying about my little patient that has pancreatitis that I can't even do anything about. But I'm worried about him right now. And so I'm crazy, but I'm still finding happiness.
But I was going to ask, though, like, how do you derive? I mean, because you live in a city where you own a practice, right? Your friends either work for you or are like other veterinarians in the area. How do you create that separation between work, veterinarian Laura, and the one who likes to go, you know?
I'm not sure that I truly create a separation because I run around with so many veterinarians. And we like talk about cases and stuff.
Yeah.
But one, we've added a dentist and a pharmacist to our friend group, and they hate hearing us ramble about vet meds. So that's good. That's a good control factor for us. But I think the fact that we have this like camaraderie and we have a good time is we just schedule fun moments for ourselves. And we like try to schedule our days off to line up. Like a lot of us are off on Wednesdays or Fridays, and like, you know, we just make the time. Every weekend we're doing something fun. I don't really say no to things if I can help it. Fishing is like my favorite thing in the world. So when I have time, I go fishing. Like, I think it's not to like oversimplify, but just do the things you like to do when you can. Because if you just come home from work and like put on True Blood and like mope on the couch and think about your sick pancreatitis dog, like you're not going to have effectively changed anything, but you're just miserable. But I can fish and still be a little bit thinking about my pancreatitis dog, but like, you know, crack that beer. My friends are all there. It's amazing how quickly that stuff, I can actually let it go for a moment. So like a good community and being in a place that affords you the opportunity to do what you love, I think is, I mean, what else can you do? You can't control the fact that your clients are being jerks or that your favorite patient is dying no matter what you do. Like, I can't fix any of that, or that my staff has made a mistake. I train, we work on it, but stuff happens where I made a mistake. Like, it's awful. It's going to keep being awful. And I think even if we're being paid appropriately and we've like got more respect, like that stuff's still going to happen. So I can't effectively change that. So you either need to get a different job or do something where you can change it, you know? And that's what I do with my life outside of it. And I know that oversimplifies, and that doesn't go into things like if you do have mental health issues, like having a like professional to talk to and all that stuff's still important. So I'm not trying to discredit that stuff, but I do think that we have to take control of the parts of our lives we have the opportunity to control. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So then how does this, I mean, you were somebody who wanted to be a veterinarian basically forever.
Yeah. Second grade Laura dictated my entire freaking future. Talking about past Laura, so here we are. She's still deciding everything.
But like, how is this different than what you envisioned it would be as a kid?
Well, I think that my image of this was I was going to be the doctor that I worked for. Like, I really thought I would come back, work for him, buy his practice. Like, that was in my head. I would be in my hometown forever in Tennessee. And I always knew I wanted to own a practice. But, like, it's just like a vague inclination, right? Like, I want to make a bunch of money. Hilarious. And I want to just fix all the animals. I don't know, when I think about what I thought this was going to be, it was just unrealistic and vague. Like, I had no idea. And it wasn't until I got older that I, like, developed this passion for, like, the human-human bond. Like, on top of the human-animal bond. But, like, I love the people. Like, I do like clients sometimes. And I do love working with staff and, like, students, and I love teaching. I don't want to teach classes, but I could lecture if I had things to talk about, which I don't. But like, I like that level, you know, like I love to engage with people about the career and about medicine. I love to like do rounds and talk about cases. Those aren't the things I thought that I was going to care about. And I never thought that, like, I guess when you want to do this from such an early point, like all of your energy is focused on getting into vet school. Like everything. Oh my gosh, I'm in freaking middle school, joining clubs, thinking about the college I'm getting into, right? I was so lame.
Yeah, wow.
That's why I'm way more fun now. Because I like spent all my lameness then.
You don't have to get into any other
Yeah, I don't
schools.
give a shit. Like, I didn't join any freaking club. Well, I joined a couple clubs in vet school begrudgingly, but only because I wanted to know what was going on.
Right.
I hate clubs. I hate them. I hate being the president of things. I don't want to do it. So once I got to vet school, I was like, nope,
Right.
done. Not getting into a residency. Don't need anything but passing scores. Like, see y'all. But so my focus was more, it was like so narrow.
Right.
That once I got into vet school, I was like, oh, now what? Like,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Right.
And I actually struggled a little in the first part of vet school, like, because that like overarching goal was gone. And as you know, like, I need, like, I call it my North Star. I need something I'm targeting.
Right.
Or I feel like I'm just like afloat. And it's really hard for me. And that's a big part of my mental health is I do need to have goals, big and small, that I'm trying to achieve, and also fun activities. But so, it wasn't until I got into vet school that I started trying to figure out, who am I? What's important to me?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Like, I don't actually think I found myself until vet school because I was too busy trying to become a vet.
Yeah.
So, and I like myself way more now, and I'm way more comfortable with myself.
Right.
And I think that that's why I developed better friendships in vet school, other than like the like-mindedness, than I did in undergrad, because I got to spend time finding out about Laura instead of just this focus.
Yeah.
And it was way more fun. Like, vet school was a blast. I mean, it was hard, don't get me wrong, but it was really fun. And so it wasn't until then that I started even actually envisioning what it would be to be a vet, which is ridiculous because it was way too late by then.
Wow. That's really interesting. See, because I always think about it as the other perspective. It's like, what do you have to sacrifice about yourself in order to like become a vet, and like, what do you feel like you're losing in that time? I think about that a lot, but it sounds like you didn't have any of those things. Mm-mm. Like, you had other, like, you rode horses or whatever. Like, you had things that made you a human, not just like a library. But yeah, it's like everything about you was like going towards
100%.
this goal.
It was one focus.
I thought about it. So when I was in vet school, that's one of the things that I would often think about is like, I just feel like a lot of people, it's like the goal was this, and then now that they're here, we don't have a way to redirect to a different goal. And so it's like we approach it with the exact same sort of fervor that we had when we were in undergrad or whatever it was, trying to be so academically inclined and sacrificing everything else that's going on in life so that you can like get the A, but not really understanding why you need the A. And I think it was like it was like a primordial soup of not knowing what the hell was going on or why you were doing anything. I don't have a statement after that. It's just something that I like often thought about.
Yeah.
I
mean, like I said, I felt like I was just treading water. I didn't know what to do until I like got a plan together. Right. What did you envision going into this?
I mean, I didn't. I mean, I envisioned starting a practice with Melissa. Like, that's it. I was like, well, because what it was is that I was always somebody who worked a lot in a lot of different ways. And I knew that I was going to end up being busy no matter what it was that I was doing. And so to me, it seemed more appropriate to do something together than to do something apart. Because if we did it together, then at least we were able to spend time together, as opposed to like doing something apart and then not really having time to come back together. So I thought, why not? It seems reasonable. And it's like, I mean, I was always somebody who was inclined to pursue medicine of some sort. Mm-hmm. And actually it was Al, when I was talking to him about like certain studies and whatever, like he would just say like, hey, this was really cool that I found. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess they do real medicine and veterinary medicine too. But that's it. It was just a practicality thing.
Yeah, it's like the exact opposite of...
Right.
Like, we had exactly opposite courses into this.
Yeah. To me, the practical choice was to go to vet school, which is crazy. And I still think it's really funny that, like, it just so happened. I applied to vet school because, like, the chemistry program at UT, they didn't accept applications until, like, February. And then they would have told you by April or something. And so it just so happened the year that we applied, which wasn't the same way for the year before us, where like we applied, we would have found out by the end of January or sometime in February.
Oh, we didn't find out till what?
Oh, I don't know.
It was super late.
Oh, was it really?
Oh, yeah, we didn't find out till like... Because I had already been accepted, like interviewed and been accepted by another vet school before my interview
Oh.
at UT.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was super late.
See, I remember it the year before. Melissa and I went down because she applied to vet school that year, and she got like a random call like, hey, you never responded to our like interview request. I'm like, well, we didn't get it, so we had no idea. So we actually we flew to Knoxville or something for that, and it was March. It was like late March because then we went to Texas for a wedding, and then we came back. That's how I knew that. But I feel like our year was earlier.
No way. I had interviewed and been accepted by Auburn before my interview at UT because the stress was gone by then. I was like, well, I know I'm going to vet school now.
Oh.
So my interview at UT was...
So when the hell did we get in?
We got in like the week before the deadline. That's when we got our acceptance.
Oh,
it was at the very like April.
Oh.
So like I think it was March when we got our letters.
Oh, then it must have been that the chemistry program like didn't require an application until like April or May or something, because like I didn't apply to that program at all, but that was the plan. Was like, oh well, if I don't get into vet school, I'll just apply to the PhD program, and then I'll do that.
That sounds awful.
Whatever that is. I still love that stuff. It is one of the things where I think about like, okay, as like a little nerd thing, like I think about how much I enjoyed just sitting down and working through math problems, like learning math throughout my, entire career in math, being like from, I don't know, middle school, I guess, when I remember, up until like late calculus stuff, like when I was in my master's program. It was all, I just liked sitting there and doing the problems.
So like I like to fish.
But legitimately,
Matt sits at his desk and does math.
Legitimately, I've been thinking like I would actually like to start doing that again, as like some people do Sudoku and. Like...
Point of clarification: this is a big nerd thing, not a little nerd thing.
Just a little tiny Scotia nerd thing.
Yeah,
but I've been thinking about this a lot.
Well, whatever, if it brings you joy and it'll
Right.
make your brain less like crusty.
That's how I feel. It's like, it's just, I remember feeling like I had more acuity then, and now.
Yeah, you're old now, bro.
Right. But part of that is because it goes unused.
Absolutely. It's like a muscle.
Right. It's a small set of problems that we engage with now, whereas before it was, you had to go through the ringer. You had to, read Chaucer one period and then go over to, and we don't have to do that anymore.
Like, can you imagine writing an essay right now? 5-paragraph, go.
Right. It'd be difficult.
Yeah, I feel like what am I supposed to? And then you make that interesting opener.
Right. I do have to say, I'm still grateful to the UCSD Humanities program. It sucked. It was 5 quarters of just horrific. It was just like we're going to study every bit of philosophy from and literature, like from the Bible to, I think Maus was like one of the last things that we read, and like everything in between, Nietzsche, Sartre, all that stuff. And it was, you have to write all these papers, and it was designed that nobody in the first quarter got A's. Nobody. I
see, talking about mental health.
Right. And it's just like, I got to see. And then it's like every quarter you get a little bit better. But we wrote so many damn essays. And I will say, like, those counterpoint essays at this point, like, I don't know, maybe I'm probably rusty, but I am so thankful to that, that experience. I wrote, great college essays after that, or for grad school. I've just like, I feel like I end up writing at least structured well because of that experience. So,
skills we love and don't get to use, right?
Yeah. I think about it when I'm actually writing. Like when I was writing the book, I think about that stuff. Anyway, yeah. What a different phase of life we're in right now. But I think about this because of this idea of having a kid, right? Like, there's a kid on the way, and I'm like, what are the skills that I not necessarily want to imbue into this poor child that is going to have to suffer through me. But like, I also want to not necessarily show him, not necessarily like make him do like the math or make him do that stuff, but like me being actively engaged in those things because I actually really like them, and to be frustrated because I can't get to the problem, but then like also find some elation in getting to the answer and working your way through it. I think that showing them that is probably important. Yeah,
that's really an interesting thought, and I think it makes perfect sense. Valuing education, valuing using your brain, working through things, being diligent. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and we know that kids get these lessons from watching, not from hearing. And so,
right. Yeah, I don't want to sit here and tell them how important it is to practice. I've sort of let go of this idea of, I don't know if I care that he's musical. It would be really fun because then we get to do that stuff together. And I remember, like, I still get joy out of discovering a song. Like, I don't like to look him up. I like to figure him out. I still get a lot of joy out of that. But there's the frustrating bit of it too, where you don't know. And I think that, or you don't know what you're doing and you don't know, like, it just like sounds crappy and all of that. And I think that if that kid can watch me do that and then apply that to, you know, whatever, Lego building or drawing,
sure,
or, you know.
But I mean, I think that's a cool point about having kids when you're like a self-aware person, is that you have two options there.
Right.
If you're lucky, your human child is like into what you're into.
Right.
And so you get to learn those things, like watch him learn and help, you know, nurture that. But the other side of that is if this kid's into skateboarding, which you've skateboarded, haven't you? Okay, let's pick something different.
Drawing.
Yeah. Sure. Your kid likes to draw. Then you get to learn a new skill. You get to work on this with this child and do this journey and help encourage them to develop their own talents and own interests, and also pick up some new weird stuff for yourself, right?
Yeah, maybe it is really powerful to also be bad at something.
Absolutely. Let them be better than you at something. We
Right.
want our kids to be better than us. And so
Yeah.
teaching them to flourish in whatever their ness is, rather than like trying to make them mini versions of us. Like, I'm not going to encourage my child to be a veterinarian.
Right.
You know, am I going to teach her to fish or him? Absolutely.
Right.
But like, you know, whatever, if it can sing, I'll be right there singing poorly along behind him, you know? It doesn't matter. But yeah, I think it's going to be a cool journey. And I think that you and Lindsay are very accepting and self-aware, and I think you're going to be very encouraging of your child finding himself, and not trying to force him into something else.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, because we've all been there as well. Like, someone at some point has had some expectation of you that you just did not want, and it's just, there's a lot of conflict there. Like, I don't know. I just felt like that there are certain times in my life where people expected something out of me, and I felt somehow indebted to that expectation.
Yeah, like freaking ballet. Woof.
Exactly, like just like ballet.
Can you imagine?
Right.
But yeah, it was awful.
Yeah.
That's not who I was.
Right.
You're probably gonna have like a little linebacker or something. You'll have no idea what to do. I'll help.
I know. If
Just call your Aunt Laura. She will explain football to you.
Thank God. Because the thing is that, like, as I realize it, I was talking to Lindsay about this. It's like, we're actually kind of athletic. Like, as in, there's a good chance that our kid could be athletic.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that information. Like,
no sports knowledge there.
Right. I'll be there. I'll figure it out. He can explain it to me. And I don't know, man. I don't know.
I'm here for you guys.
I appreciate that.
I'll help your child's sport.
I will say, just to touch on one thing that you said, is like, I do remember, and I remember this clearly, and my dad talks about it too, but when he came home with a guitar, he had like a little classical guitar thing, and he was taking lessons, which I've never done. And he was like, he had all these like pieces of paper, and there was so much stuff, and he was practicing. And I like took the guitar one day when he wasn't practicing, and I like figured out Happy Birthday. I was like 7 or something. Gosh. And I come back, I'm like, look, Dad, like, look what I did. And I like played it for him, and he quit guitar after that. Because he was like, I will never have the talent that is associated with that. Like, he's approaching it from a totally different level. But what it didn't allow, in retrospect, in like far retrospect, it was like, it didn't allow for that moment where he could be bad at something and I could be good at it, and we could learn how to do it together. Because you know what I could have benefited from was him being bad at guitar.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's a really hard lesson when you are born to successful parents, or parents that like value success and all these things, which I think being born to an academic family, which is what's going to happen. Yeah. Being okay with like sucking, like being bad at things. Yeah. None of us are very good at that, and would be better. We would be better people if we were okay with losing sometimes and not being the best.
Right.
while balancing that with striving to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to fail, but it doesn't mean you should quit, and like things like that. I think those are valuable, challenging lessons.
Yeah.
Especially for accomplished people like you and Lindsay.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine. Like, I feel inferiority when growing up, it was like looking at my mom. It's like, God, she was smart and accomplished, and she's like director of a speech pathology program in like her mid-20s and all of that. And like, I look at my dad, and he just like, wakes up in the morning and recites a sonnet that he like wrote in his dreams or something. And I'm just like, I will never be
interesting
this level of intellect. And so I've lived in that shadow my whole life. And it's not their fault. It's like they're very encouraging and loving, and they've never really been, like, you have to go to medical school or, whatever. They never had that for me. But still, I felt pretty self-conscious about it. And so I am very acute. And they were young, right? Like, they didn't have time to accomplish all the things that, like, I have had the time to accomplish in my life. It's like you look around this room and it's like, oh, this is the rock opera that I wrote. And these are like, oh, yeah, I did this improv show with this person. And like, I know
don't
this
mind my
painter
podcast and my own business. And
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't want to set up, I want it to be an example of like what they can do as well. But there's like process involved. It's not hey, this fella is on like some pedestal somewhere.
It's that nurturing without expectations that's challenging, because you do have expectations.
I do. Yeah. I mean, we were talking to our financial advisor, and they were like, we were talking about a 529, so opening up something for the kids' like college expenses. Because the fact of the matter is that when they fill out the FAFSA, they're going to have to report on our income, which, 20 years from now or 18 years from now is going to ideally be...
Yeah, better not suck.
Right. It'll be a lot more than what my mom made, in that same time. And like, my dad wasn't really on the FAFSA at that point. So like, and I didn't get financial aid. I had to pay my way for all of that stuff anyway, right? So like, it's not going to work out. So I'm like, well, let's just lean into this and save for them. But they were like, well, so, okay, what type of school are we talking about? Like, what is the amount of money that we should be thinking about? And I'm like, Ivy League. Like, we should plan for 2 years at an Ivy League education, because one, most likely he's going to be able to do it if he really wants to. And if I'm going to be preparing for something, I might as well be preparing for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want the limiting factor to be the finances, right? That's why I tell people to get insurance.
Yeah,
so you can make the choices based off of your pet or your needs or your child, not based on, can we afford this?
Yeah.
But then the flip side of that coin is, how do you, as a like upper middle class, hopefully above middle class one day, couple, have a child that like values work ethic and like has knows how to work for things that they want, and like, I think that's a balance. I often say this, Clayton and I talk about this a lot, when we like watch these movies and stuff, we talk about these kids that like climbed through adversity to get into college, right? Like, I walked into college. Like, I worked really hard in school, sure, but I had a great home life, supportive parents, a good education, drive, encouragement. So there was no climbing to what I did. I just like walked in.
Right.
It's not that I didn't earn it, but I certainly didn't have to like take a machete through the jungle to get here.
Right. Yeah. Like, there's a congressman who grew up in the projects, right? Like, that is a different trajectory.
Absolutely. Like, you worked so much harder to get here because you had things working against you. Nothing was working against me. So like, the amount of work it took for me to get there was just less.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you, I know for my answer for me is that my parents, I got my first job at a barn when I was 14 and started to learn the value of having money then and worked. That's it. Like, I've always had a job, but now as an employer, I'm getting these kids who are like, out of high school, they're in their like early mid 20s and they're applying for their first job.
Right.
And I don't hire them.
Right.
I'm like, I don't want to be your, now if it's a 17-year-old coming to me and like want to work in the kennels, I actually don't mind that. But when you're like 24 and this is your first job, I will not hire them. I'm not interested. I'm sorry that your parents didn't encourage you to be
Right.
self-sufficient, but I don't have time to be your mom and teach you to work. I don't have time for it.
Right.
And that is a bias that I have. Like, I don't know. So I think that that's important, and something to think about is, just because we can give our children things, should we?
Right.
And
Yeah. And that's and we're all figuring that out, because each generation, for the most part, each of our generations is going to be in a different financial place than the generation before. So like what we grew up with is going to be different than what it was. So like, I don't know how to navigate that. And I have no idea, but I do know that I'm so glad. So I had 2 jobs when I was 15. Like, my first job was at a retirement home. My second job was at a movie theater. I worked both of them for about a year, and then I stayed at the movie theater, and I just like picked up hours there, increased my hours. I'm so glad for that experience. Now, I went the other way, right? Like, where there were summers where I legitimately had 5 jobs simultaneously, and all I was doing was working. So I don't know.
right. Like, you don't want to take their childhood away.
Exactly. A lot of that was escape. A lot of that then also was about, those are summers where I had to pay for a lot more things, right? Like, I had my own apartment, and
Right.
it's expensive living in San Diego. So, but yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And surely that's something that we'll figure out.
But it's something to think about. Like, just because you can buy it, maybe you shouldn't buy it.
Right,
like,
exactly.
teaching children the value of $1. Because I do think that that's something that I feel like at least my parents, and I don't want to say their generation, because I think that's a broad overreach, but like, I know my parents, like, they taught me the value of like taking care of the things you have, and working for the things that you want, and not expecting things to be given to you. But they did it in like a very nurturing way. And I also still had a great time. Like, I never felt like I worked away my childhood, but I did have a job and responsibility early. But like, when I was at 14, we worked. So we didn't own a horse yet.
Right.
So if we worked for the barn, we got to ride. And so that was the currency then.
Right.
But it put value to my work.
Yeah.
And that was more important at the time than money. I was too young for that. I didn't have gas or anything.
Correct.
So I picked up rocks. They were building a stall. Or building a barn, so all of us were picking up rocks. Then we got to go on a trail ride.
Yeah.
But I learned the value of work.
Right.
And that you work towards, if you want something, there's a transaction for it if you're willing to put the work in. And so I think that was really valuable for me. And I didn't have to work. My parents were fine. Yeah. Blue collar, but fine.
Right.
But I did, and it was a really good thing, because I think it helped make me the person I am today. Maybe that's a good thing. It is a thing, though.
We'll ask Clayton.
He better answer correctly. I'll know.
One of the difficult things with that though for me is that I don't feel like I have great relationship with money, as in, because I never had it, and when I did have it, it made me uncomfortable, and so I spent it. And I always sort of have this feeling that it can go away at any moment. There's no one in my life who has financial security. So like, I don't know what that looks like. So, to me, what I also have to then realize is that I have an unhealthy relationship with, I'm better about it now, because like, I know that in the past I was like trying to purchase things as a way to like fill holes in myself. And so I don't have that in nearly the same way anymore. But I don't have like this, I don't know, maybe I do like treat my stuff better, and I definitely don't look at it as all disposable, but I don't have a relationship with money where it's like, oh, this thing is important, because I'm always like, you know what, if you work, you'll be able to find it again.
Yeah, and I do actually think that you will have to be careful with that because of the job that you have, right? For you, like, the transaction's different. Like, if you want something, you can do this math with shifts, right? Like, if I do this many shifts, I can cover that.
Yeah.
But like, your average person, myself included, that isn't how it works. I mean, I could pick up shifts, but sure. I'm working full time. I'm a business owner. It'd be really challenging to not want to jump off a cliff. And also, like, sorry, but so like, financial planning for you is different than financial planning for me. And I think I probably represent more of the general population in the way my finances work. Like, I'm going to get the same amount No, we get dividends and stuff from the practice, and that's a little different, but that is not predictable.
Right.
Yours is predictable. You can decide, if I need extra cash, I'll take an extra shift.
Right.
And so I think the struggle is going to be, like, money is almost, I don't want to say less valuable, but it's very different. And that'll be hard because I think you need to prepare your kid for both ways, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not that many jobs like yours.
No. And I know that this job in particular, I have this job because I am this person.
For sure.
Yeah. It's not like...
That makes perfect sense.
Right. Yeah, it's a necessity. But I do, like, but to your point, like, the currency ends up being something else, which for me is time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, like, I don't want to be wasting money on, like, you know what's interesting is that I've always wanted a Martin acoustic guitar, a Martin D28, maybe D35. These are, like, very specific models of Martin guitar that I don't own. And the question is why? And, like, because I could just, like, to your point, right? Just go. I mean, they're like, what, $3,000 guitars or whatever. So, like, do the shift math, go out and do that. Well, I bought a big TV. I did the shift math for the big TV, but I haven't done it for the guitars. And I don't have, like, a really good reason for that yet. I feel like it's almost like the separate idea. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. This is now like its own thing, which is like, why the hell do I not have one of those guitars? But I feel like I don't want to treat it in the same way as I would a big TV. It's not just another thing. It's like this, it's something to aspire to.
Right. Like, you're not really, it's not so much as saving up for things as a working, like, it's different.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Your TV costs this many shifts.
Right.
But, like, honestly, you probably don't want your guitars to be related to veterinary medicine.
It's probably possible. Yeah, that's probably what it is. I think that in my mind, there's, like, life milestones that allow me to then create these things or purchase these things. Like, I bought my Taylor acoustic. I bought when I graduated from college because no one else was going to get me anything.
Get it. Yeah.
Right. But anyway, so, like, now it's like, if I were to purchase a lot of these things, like, yeah, there's some great guitars that I would love to have, but I'm not about to invest more time into work so that I can have these things. It's better for me to have more time to be able to interact with the, guitars that I do have, to be here, to write, to,
well, and
whatever.
that's a priority thing, right?
Yes.
Putting a monetary value to your time and, like, prioritizing what's important, and those are all the balancing things veterinarians suck at. Right.
And I was terrible at it for a long time.
So what is when you think about your future, obviously it looks a little different now that you're, like, having a human child, but
yeah, I mean, a little, yeah.
So, like, when you, like, okay, so let me phrase it by telling so, like, when I think about my future, I have this image in my mind that's my ultimate goal, and it's a personal goal, it's not a career goal, and I, like, am spending my career trying to make that goal a reality.
To be continued in part 2.